DreamWorks heroes are supposed to save the day, but some of them only became heroes after they caused the mess first. They lied, ran away, broke rules, ignored warnings, started fights, or made selfish choices that pulled everyone else into danger. Sure, they fixed things by the end, but that does not erase the damage they created along the way. And once you look at these movies from the other side, the real villain is not always who the story tells you it is. So let's count down 7 DreamWorks heroes who were actually the problem. Number 7. Megamind and the superhero identity crisis. Meadow City was perfectly safe with Metro Man protecting it. Sure, there was the occasional supervillain scheme, but the system worked. The city had a protector, the villain had a worthy opponent, and civilians lived their lives knowing that good would always triumph over evil. Then Megamind had to go and accidentally kill his nemesis, and everything fell apart. The moment Metro Man was out of the picture, Megamind realized he had never actually wanted to rule the city. He just wanted someone to fight. So what did this supposed genius do? He created Titan, accidentally injecting the serum into Hal Stewart, a creepy cameraman with zero moral compass and serious anger issues. Within days, Titan was terrorizing the city worse than Megamind ever had, destroying buildings and threatening innocent people with actual malicious intent. Megamind spent years perfecting his role as a theatrical villain, but he never bothered to understand what makes a real hero. When he tried to manufacture one, he accidentally injected the superhero serum into Hal Stewart during a clumsy physical struggle, handing devastating power to an unstable civilian. The city that had been safe under Metro Man's protection suddenly faced a genuine psychopath with superpowers, all because Megamind's reckless experiment completely failed. Even after defeating Titan, Megamind appointed himself as Metro City's new protector without any democratic process or public approval. The citizens never chose him as their hero. They just had to accept that their former tormentor was now their only hope because he had eliminated every other option through his own incompetence. Number 6. Poe and the Accidental Apocalypse Prevention. The Valley of Peace lived up to its name for generations until Poe showed up at the Dragon Warrior ceremony. Master Shifu had trained the Furious Five into an elite fighting force capable of protecting the valley from any threat. The Kung Fu masters maintained order, criminals stayed in prison, and the ancient weapons of mass destruction remained safely sealed away. Then one panda with a noodle obsession wandered into the wrong place at the wrong time. Poe's mere existence as the Dragon Warrior triggered a chain reaction that nearly destroyed everything. Tai Lung, who had been securely imprisoned for 20 years, only escaped because Poe's selection drove Master Shifu into an emotional spiral. Shifu sent Zheng the Goose Messenger to warn Chorgam Prison about Tai Lung's potential escape, but that warning gave Tai Lung the very opportunity he needed to break free. If Poe had never been chosen as the Dragon Warrior, Tai Lung would have remained imprisoned, the valley would have stayed peaceful, and the Furious Five would have continued their effective protection of the region. Instead, Poe's arrival awakened sleeping dragons, literally. His weight problems delayed his training, his clumsiness destroyed sacred artifacts, and his unconventional methods threw centuries of disciplined kung fu tradition into chaos. Even worse, Poe's success against Tai Lung inadvertently accelerated bigger threats. Lord Shen was already planning his dark conquest, but hearing about the Dragon Warrior escalated his massive paranoia and his destructive drive. Kai the Spirit Warrior returned from the spirit realm because he finally stole Master Oogway's chi, but once he arrived, he targeted the peaceful valley. The region became a target for ancient evil because Poe was constantly standing directly in their destructive path. Number 5. Alex the Lion and the Madagascar Madness. Alex was living his best life at the Central Park Zoo. He had adoring fans, regular meals, and a comfortable enclosure with climate control. His best friends Marty the Zebra, Gloria the Hippo, and Melman the Giraffe were all content with their safe, predictable lives. Then Alex had to go and be selfish about everything, and suddenly they were all stranded on a tropical island fighting for survival. When Marty expressed his desire to see the wild, a good friend would have talked it through, maybe arranged for some nature documentaries or a trip to a wildlife preserve. Instead, Alex immediately made it all about himself, throwing a tantrum about being abandoned and refusing to understand why Marty might want something different. His melodramatic reaction drove Marty to actually escape, forcing Gloria and Melman to chase after them into the chaotic streets of New York City. The 4 friends ended up being shipped to Africa, but they never made it that far because the penguins hijacked the boat and turned it sharply. They crashed on Madagascar, where Alex's pampered zoo life became everyone else's nightmare. He had no survival skills, no understanding of the wild, and worst of all, no ability to hunt for food. When his zoo-provided steaks ran out, Alex started looking at his friends as potential meals. Marty wanted to experience freedom, but Alex turned that dream into a horror movie. Gloria and Melman never wanted to leave the zoo at all, but they ended up stranded in a hostile environment because Alex's dramatic reaction turned a simple rescue mission into chaos. The penguins who actually engineered their escape had their own agenda, but Alex's emotional instability was what turned a simple rescue mission into a life-threatening disaster. The island of Madagascar was also perfectly fine before they arrived. The lemurs had their own society, the fossa had their place in the ecosystem, and everything was in balance. Alex's arrival introduced apex predator energy into a community that had never dealt with anything like him, disrupting the natural order and traumatizing King Julian's subjects. Number 4. Hiccup and the Dragon War escalation. Burke had a functional system for dealing with dragons. It wasn't pretty and it certainly wasn't peaceful, but it worked. The Vikings fought off dragon raids, protected their livestock, and maintained their way of life for generations. The dragons attacked, the Vikings defended themselves, and both species survived in a hostile but stable equilibrium. Then Hiccup decided he knew better than centuries of Viking wisdom. When Hiccup shot down Toothless, he could have followed Viking tradition and killed the Night Fury to prove himself as a warrior. Instead, he chose to befriend the dragon, keeping it secret from his entire tribe and lying to his father about his newfound fighting abilities. His deception put every Viking at risk because they had no idea that their weakest member was consorting with their deadliest enemy. Hiccup's discovery that dragons were being controlled by the giant Red Death Queen should have been shared with the Viking leadership immediately. Instead, he kept vital intelligence about their enemy completely to himself. Because of this, his father Stoic unknowingly led the adult warriors directly into a massive slaughter. When the adults walked into a situation they couldn't understand, Hiccup had to scramble a dangerous rescue mission because he had withheld crucial military information. The battle with the Red Death resulted in massive destruction, numerous injuries, and the loss of Hiccup's leg. Toothless's prosthetic tail fin caught fire, leaving him permanently dependent on Hiccup for flight. The dragon that had once been a free, wild creature was now bound to a human partner, all because Hiccup's initial deception and refusal to communicate vital intelligence forced a catastrophic confrontation that utterly devastated his tribe. After the Red Death's defeat, Burke transformed from a warrior society into a dragon-riding civilization, but this change was imposed by Hiccup's actions rather than chosen by the community. The Vikings who had spent their entire lives learning to fight dragons suddenly had to learn to live with them, abandoning their cultural identity because one teenager decided to rewrite the rules of engagement. Number 3. Puss in Boots and the reputation destruction. Puss in Boots built his legend on swagger, skill, and an endless supply of 9 lives. He was the most feared and respected cat in all the fairy tale kingdoms, with a reputation that opened doors and solved problems with nothing more than his adorable eyes and razor-sharp claws. Then he met death personified and realized that his entire identity was built on a lie he told himself about being immortal. For years, Puss had been reckless with his lives, treating them like extra chances in a video game rather than precious gifts. He died from running with the bulls, from playing poker with dogs, from a poorly timed cannon launch in the wrong place. Each death was preventable, each resurrection was wasted, and each return made him more arrogant about his supposed invincibility. When he burned through 8 lives, he had 1 left and no idea how to live with actual consequences. Puss spent his final life running away from danger instead of facing it, hiding in Mama Luna's house with dozens of other cats and pretending to be a pampered pet named Pickles. The legendary hero who had inspired stories across the kingdoms was now too scared to pick up a sword. Every person who had counted on Puss in Boots for help was left hanging because their hero had discovered he was mortal. His quest to find the wishing star put everyone around him in deadly danger. Perito the therapy dog, Kitty Softpaws, and even the 3 Bears crime family all became targets because they were traveling with Puss. The star itself was hidden for good reason, but Puss's selfish desire to restore his lives brought multiple dangerous groups into conflict, creating chaos that spread far beyond his personal problems. When Puss finally faced death in the cave, his acceptance of mortality culminated in a fierce stand to actively protect his friends. He finally realized the value of his life, but the chaotic, dangerous journey he forced his innocent allies to endure to reach that basic realization was entirely his fault. Number 2. Shrek and the Far, Far Away political crisis. Shrek just wanted to be left alone in his swamp. He had a simple life, a peaceful routine, and no interest in the politics of Far, Far Away or the complex social dynamics of fairy tale creatures. Then Lord Farquaad dumped a bunch of refugees on his property, and instead of finding a reasonable solution, Shrek decided to solve the problem with violence and intimidation. The fairy tale creatures that Farquaad banished to Shrek's swamp were innocent victims of political persecution. They needed sanctuary, protection, and someone to advocate for their rights. Instead, Shrek treated them like invaders and agreed to Farquaad's deal to remove them without considering what would happen to them afterward. He prioritized his personal comfort over the safety and well-being of vulnerable refugees. Shrek's rescue of Princess Fiona was supposed to be a simple transaction, but he fell in love and complicated everything. His relationship with Fiona triggered a series of political crises that destabilized the entire kingdom of Far, Far Away. King Harold was forced to make deals with the fairy godmother. Prince Charming launched a coup attempt, and the social order that had maintained peace for generations collapsed into chaos. After King Harold's death, Shrek was supposed to become the ruler of Far, Far Away, but he abandoned his responsibilities to live in his swamp with his family. The kingdom needed leadership during a transition period, but Shrek passed the crown to Arthur, a teenage boy with no training or experience in governance. Arthur's reign may have worked out eventually, but Shrek left an entire kingdom in the hands of an unprepared child because he didn't want to deal with royal duties. The alternate reality created by Rumpelstiltskin in Shrek Forever After revealed what the world would look like if Shrek had never existed. Without Shrek's interference, King Harold and Queen Lillian would have easily signed the entire kingdom completely over to Rumpelstiltskin. The vibrant kingdom of Far, Far Away would have instantly fallen under a horrific, tyrannical dictatorship completely controlled by an army of flying witches, trading one massive, chaotic political crisis for another dark reality. Number 1. Shrek and the Swamp Isolation Cycle. The biggest problem with Shrek isn't any single crisis he caused or any particular kingdom he destabilized. The real issue is that Shrek never learned to balance his need for solitude with his responsibilities to the people who depended on him. Throughout 4 movies, Shrek repeatedly chose isolation over community, running back to his swamp every time things got complicated, instead of working through problems with his friends and family. In the first movie, Shrek spent his entire life scaring villagers and causing chaos simply because he believed that's what ogres were supposed to do. He never questioned whether he had to be the monster everyone expected him to be. When the fairy tale creatures invaded his swamp, his first instinct was to use threats and violence to solve the problem, rather than trying to understand why they were there or what they needed. After falling in love with Fiona, Shrek still couldn't commit to change. He misinterpreted her conversation with Donkey about her transformation, assuming she was disgusted by his appearance rather than asking for clarification. His insecurity and poor communication nearly cost him the relationship entirely, and his pattern of assuming the worst in people continued throughout the series. Shrek 2 showed that even marriage and integration into royal society couldn't cure Shrek's fundamental selfishness. When Fiona's parents struggled to accept him, he took a potion that changed his appearance instead of working to prove his worth as he truly was. His transformation into a human created more problems than it solved, and his eventual choice to remain an ogre came only after he had put everyone through unnecessary drama. By Shrek Forever After, Shrek had everything he claimed to want: a loving family, loyal friends, and acceptance from society. But he was still miserable because he missed the simplicity of his old life. Instead of talking to Fiona about his feelings or finding healthy ways to cope with the stress of parenthood, he made a deal with Rumpelstiltskin that erased his entire existence and created a dystopian alternate reality. The world that existed without Shrek was worse in many ways, but it was also more honest. Fiona led a resistance movement against tyranny, the ogres fought for their survival with dignity, and the fairy tale creatures found strength in unity rather than relying on one grumpy hero to solve their problems. Shrek's existence had given everyone a convenient excuse to avoid taking responsibility for their own lives. Even after learning his lesson and returning to the original timeline, Shrek continued the same pattern. He hosted parties in his swamp for his friends and family, but he was still the center of attention, still controlling the social dynamics from his isolated kingdom. He had learned to appreciate what he had, but he hadn't learned to truly share power or responsibility with others. The core problem with Shrek as a character is that his journey toward accepting love and community was always on his terms. He allowed people into his life when he chose to, he participated in society when it was convenient for him, and he retreated to his swamp whenever things got difficult. This pattern created instability for everyone around him because they never knew when their husband, father, or friend would decide that solitude was more important than their relationships. Throughout the entire DreamWorks franchise, these heroes consistently prioritized their personal comfort and growth over the well-being of the communities that depended on them. They made decisions based on their immediate emotional needs rather than considering the long-term consequences for everyone else. They created more problems than they solved, and they left other people to clean up the messes they made while pursuing their own character development.